So Amika George, welcome to Day of the Girl, and thank you so much for being part of WOW Women of the World Festival. The WOW Foundation is really trying to honour the work of girls and all the things that girls and non-binary do from a very, very early age to make change happen. But can you tell us about yourself? What are the things that you primarily have been an activist around?
Sure, thanks so much for having me. So yeah, my name is Amika George and I'm a 20-year-old student. I'm from London and I'm at the University of Cambridge, and I'm an activist around period poverty. I started a campaign called Free Periods about 3 years ago after reading about girls in the UK having to miss school for sometimes a week every month because they couldn't afford menstrual products. There are really horrific stories in the news at the beginning of 2017 about girls having to go to school for sometimes a week every month using toilet paper or newspaper or socks or whatever they could find to be able to get an education. And I'm so fortunate I've never had to suffer through that myself. So reading about it really shocked me and kind of compelled me to do something about it, because I quite naively expected the government to condemn it and I thought there'd be free tampons everywhere after that was in the news, but that just didn't come. It was actually raised in Parliament that week and the Education Secretary at the time refused to answer the question. So that really angered me, and I think being a teenager and social media felt like the first place to go to. So I started an online petition and I called it Free Periods, and the idea is that I believe that the government should provide free menstrual products in all schools and colleges in England in the same way that they provide the toilet paper and the soap for the schools. And it was a long fight. It took about 3 years, in which I went from the petition to a real life protest outside Downing Street in 2017, attended by over 2,000 young people who were all kind of dressed in red and wearing red and holding banners that had period puns on, and it was really fun. I think it was a real celebration of periods, even though we were protesting something pretty awful. I then spent 2018 kind of talking about period poverty in a more international level, and I was really lucky to travel and talk about how prolific period poverty was around the world. And then 2019 I launched Free Periods as a legal campaign, in which it became a organisation with, and we started working with lawyers in London to say that the government actually has a legal obligation to provide the products for free in schools under the Equality Act. And then that was successful and finally pushed the government to make the pledge in April of 2019. And then from January of 2020, free period products have been available in all secondary school and colleges, and so that's kind of where we're at now. We're encouraging all schools to sign up to that scheme and make sure that they're distributing the products in the way they should be, and that they should also encourage period education to get rid of the taboo and stigma that's prevented us from really tackling this issue sooner.
That's a kind of a really long haul. You mustn't have realised when you started that it was going to be years.
Definitely not. I mean, I think I was quite naive at the time, in that I thought, I was so angry about the existence of period poverty, and online there were so many teenage activists, mainly teenage girls, who were contacting me and saying, I've told everyone I know to sign this petition, I'm coming to the protest, I'm volunteering, I've donated, I'm so passionate, what more can I do? So because I was constantly in contact with these passionate teenage activists, I thought this has got to happen soon. But then it was almost like that would kind of crumble when I went to Parliament and met a single male MP who would kind of say, oh yeah, I care about this, but then never follow up or never actually raise it in Parliament as they'd promised to. And so for me, that kind of real contrast between the passion of the young activists and the radio silence of the MPs, it kind of taught me a lot, I think, at quite a young age about the nature of politics right now.
Mm-hmm. And when young people contact you and ask for your advice, I have this idea, I want to do something, but how do I do it? What advice do you give other young people about how to become activists, how to plunge themselves in? Are you able to give them a kind of a little toolkit in some way of try this, this and this?
Yeah, I mean, I should mention that I've actually written a book that's coming out in January, which is a very practical toolkit called Make It Happen. how to be an activist based on my experiences with free periods, but kind of along the lines that anyone can and really should be an activist in today's age. And I hope it will help people who have maybe always thought about being an activist to just give them the initial steps and tools to get started. But I do think that's the hardest part. I think we've kind of normalized this idea that activism has to involve protesting every minute, or chaining yourself to a railing, or doing something quite extreme and probably quite scary for a lot of young people. But actually it can be small actions, it can be in your local community, it can be invisible, and the hardest part is just deciding to get started and taking that step and believing that actually as a young person particularly, and as a young woman, and I should also say as a young woman of color, you're just as likely to make change as anyone else, and you have just as much of a right as an older white man who goes to parliament every day to create laws. He can make change in the same way that you can. And I think it's quite sad that a lot of people believe that you can only make change by voting every 5 years, but actually I do think as people we have a responsibility and the opportunity and the capability to really make change in our communities, even if that's just online, or if it's in your local area in a small way. If you can change one person's life or one person's day, that's really impactful and important.
Thanks, Amika.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.